Welcome, everyone. It's so wonderful to have you all join us today. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Melissa Loble. I'm the Chief Customer Experience Officer with Instructure, and I'm really here just to facilitate a great discussion around how standards, particularly standards around data exchange, can really have a positive impact on student success. So joining me in this conversation is Andy Fisher, who's the manager of LMS and LMS operations at Penn State. Thank you, Andy, for being here. And Eric Gardiner, who's the director of industry marketing at Top Hat. So you're probably asking yourselves, why Instructure, Top Hat, Penn State? And what are we planning to share in this conversation? Well, together, all three of us, via leveraging standards, particularly Caliper, but data standards more broadly and data exchange focus more broadly, we were able to support some pretty incredible work that Penn State has done via our technologies. And I think in the world of standards, we so often think of standards as an interaction between an institution like Penn State and a single vendor. But really, the exciting part about this is about an institution and two vendors, or it could be multiple vendors. And how do we all come together and work together so that we can have the impact that we're looking to drive? So with that was my quick introduction. I promise we'll keep an eye on questions. In your attendee website, in the right column, you'll see a Q&A section. We'll make sure we get those questions, and I'll try to answer those at the appropriate times during our discussion. But I want to start the conversation with Andy. And Andy, would you mind sharing a bit about some of the challenges you faced and how Instructure and Top Hat helped you address that via the use of standards? So set the context for us.
Sure, and thanks, Melissa. So I just a little bit more. I've been in and out of kind of the IMS stuff for a long time and working in the LMS space for a while. So kind of the long view of things, I used to spend a lot of time at Penn State many years ago before LTI, and just the idea of LTI with working on integrations, right? And being able to use new tools and getting data back and forth. And that was really a team's full-time job trying to get some of that work done. LTI came along, and now we're well into it. So I think at Penn State we have around 30 tools and another 20 or so that are in some form of the pipeline. Some are very light integrations with LTI, and some are very deep integrations like Top Hat. So with that big increase in tools, we're finding that a lot of the activity that would typically take place in Canvas is kind of all over the place. It may be in these other tools, and it's not because that Canvas is not providing the right interface. It's just that there are some very focused set of pieces of content and tooling that works really well, right? So we're allowed to get to those specific areas with these other LTI tools and get things that work really well. Now, once that happened, we have a lot of different tools out there. So we're kind of losing the big picture of students and are they active? And particularly during COVID, right? But we needed to track down students or even make sure that they're able to get online. It was really difficult to do so when we have all these LTI tools that are disconnected. And this is kind of where we started talking through Caliper. So the challenge we had was Top Hat is a vendor, Instructure is a vendor, and we did not anticipate either one of them buying each other and consolidating product pipelines. So we had to also work with our own group as well to say, all right, how can we get a better picture of Top Hat in particular and Canvas to make sure that we know what's happening in these systems and they're being used and students are successful. And that's where really Caliper fell, right? So Canvas has been pushing out some Caliper feeds for a while, and Top Hat started doing that as well. And that's kind of the challenge we had was the standard was there and helped fill those needs of getting those data feeds out of those systems so that we can then have some actionable stuff we can do. The LTI tools were always there. Instructure spends an enormous amount of time staying up to date, modernizing their interface, and provided a great kind of way for us to even get 30 tools in place so that we could easily get to the specific tooling that we wanted. So then once we had this Caliper feed set up, right, the problem is kind of moved down the line, and we did not have to get the Top Hat folks and the Instructure folks and the Penn State folks, even our own development teams and researchers, all together in one room, which is where it makes things complicated in terms of organizational planning and project planning, that's where the standard fit in, right? That Top Hat implemented a standard, Instructure implemented a standard, Penn State is consuming a standard. And then along with our relationship with Unison and the next problem was the data came out, right? We needed somewhere to put this data, right? And that's where Unison came in, that they were able to work with those standards and kind of consume that data and put it into a storage layer that we are then able to access at Penn State. So I don't necessarily need to know exactly Top Hat's kind of pieces of information they're passing, right? And how they're going to pass it, that I can just consume it all at the end, right? And that's really where the standard came into play. And there's I do want to plug Unison a little bit here. There's the technology we had started using is a UDP, and that's this kind of data storage layer. And that has now been kind of opened up more to the general public through Google Marketplace, and it's listed as an item there that more non-Unison members can go and try out and use, because kind of fill this space as well as the data storage layer. And I think James Russell from Unison is doing a presentation tomorrow at 10:45 that talks a little bit more about Unison and UDP and how some of that stuff all works together. So really what this is we had a problem of a bunch of different vendors and how to get things together with the least amount of work on our part, right, and the vendors. And that's really where the standard came in, to kind of fill those needs.
Thank you so much, Andy, for that background. And I think something you said just really resonated with me. In the past, we'd have to get all the vendors and the institution and the whatever institution organization like a Unison all in the same room together to hash out non-standard based or API based and some standards here and there integrations. And that takes a lot of time and it gets really complicated. But the fact that Instructure, Penn State, and Top Hat all implemented the standard made it much easier for Penn State to just go do the work that you needed to do. But I think you also mentioned that Instructure, we've been doing this for a long time, and we're probably fairly, I would imagine a fair amount of the folks listening to this session know some of the work that we've done around Caliper and around just standards in general. But I'm not sure everyone attending this session may know all of the great work that Top Hat has done. And so I'm hoping, Eric, you can share a little bit around how Top Hat has addressed the challenges, the opportunity that Andy just shared, and maybe even just a little bit more about Top Hat in general, just so that we can set the stage for folks understanding how Penn State, how Unison was able to really just leverage both of our implementations of the standards and then run.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think I've got a few slides that might help our audience for those who aren't familiar with Top Hat.
That I'm pulling those up as we speak.
Wonderful.
All right, there you go.
So like in a nutshell, Top Hat is a teaching and learning platform designed to empower instructors to ensure students are attentive, engaged, and achieving across in-person, virtual, and also hybrid learning environments. So we view ourselves as a complement to Instructure and other learning management systems by serving as a student engagement layer to bring course materials to life and empower faculty with what we call like real-time signals and insights or small data across a range of different learning activities. So, when Penn State first moved to remote teaching at the start of the pandemic, the university, like many institutions, was relying largely on its LMS. If you want to just advance to the next slide. But, as Andy noted, I think administrators also wanted instructors to engage their students, not only through the LMS, but before, during, and after class. So they turned to Top Hat to help instructors build those interactions and engagements directly into the existing elements of each course. So you can see a bunch of features listed on the screen here. So we cover like a lot of the engagement activities that happen in class, but that extends outside the classroom through interactive readings and assignments and tests and so on. So I'm not going to go into every little feature because there's a lot to unpack there. Top Hat does a fair bit. But I would say too, in the context of our conversation today, one of the key benefits are the real-time signals and insights that we capture across that learning journey, which is really at the center of the discussion today. So I'm going to just go to the next slide and let me bring this to life for you, a little bit of a day in the life sort of example. So like thinking about before class, we offer interactive readings and assignments that allow students to self-assess as they go, while providing instructors with a view of whether students are actually completing these assignments and how well they're actually comprehending the information. So imagine if you're an anatomy or a physiology professor and you've assigned that first reading. That includes a series of embedded questions for students to answer, because it's an interactive digital textbook powered by the Top Hat platform. And now, before the second week of class even starts, you already are getting a sense of how the class is progressing. Are they actually going and completing the readings? And if so, are they actually understanding the material, and who exactly is actually getting lost? So you have that information at your fingertips before you even step inside the classroom. So on the next slide, like speaking of the sort of that in-class engagement aspect, we bring lectures to life through polls and quizzes and discussions that allow instructors to gauge student progress and course correct in the moment based on student responses. And we have, other tools that are part of the platform, community building tools that help instructors understand whether students are feeling that sense of belonging. Are they actually participating? Are they leaning into these discussions and so forth? So at the start of a class, you might use a poll or a quiz to help you decide where you're actually going to spend your time. Maybe the quiz shows that students are ready to move on to the next module, or perhaps instead you realize you need to actually retread material that isn't landing. So many instructors use Top Hat to do exactly this, to help them prioritize what they actually do in class and where they can really leverage their expertise to keep students on track and moving forward. And then the last slide I'll share is sort of the idea of these insights and bringing these insights to life. So, as I mentioned, the platform captures everything from attendance and participation to readings, assignments, test results, and even satisfaction with the course itself. So you can do, an exit poll, for example, to gauge how students perceive that learning experience for that given class. So all that's tracked automatically. And that gives instructors access to real-time data. Are students actually showing up? Are they participating? Are they investing themselves in readings and assignments and in-class discussions? So the really neat thing is that you can sign up for a weekly course report, which adds another layer of data, actionable data for the instructor. So it captures a synopsis of all the activities that the instructors run through Top Hat, and with indicators of how is the class actually progressing, along with insights into who's excelling and who may be falling behind. So now you know exactly who to reach out to. Maybe it's to offer some encouragement, and we certainly should be doing that. Or in some cases, maybe we need to invite the student to for office hours or student hours, as the term is now sort of coined, for some extra help. And I think by putting these insights at their fingertips, both as learning unfolds and through things like the weekly course report, we can help faculty create feedback loops to help them actually iterate and improve upon the learning experience, not just over time, that sort of backward view, but in the moment itself.
That's awesome. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing those slides so we can get back to our speaker view. That is super helpful to set the foundation, because I think now, everybody listening to this will understand the rich engagement and participation data of Top Hat, and why standards and being able to collect that data, leverage that data, get insights from that data at Penn State, why that was so valuable. So Eric, I'm curious, your thoughts around what role did standards play in this particular work, or in helping Penn State address what they were looking to accomplish?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the platform generates a lot of these real-time signals and insights. So that's sort of immediately available, whether or not there's an integration. But I think the real power is helping, the power of standards to help an institution like Penn State actually free up that data in a way that's a lot more flexible, and that then allows them to combine it with other sources like Instructure to create much more of a holistic picture of the student experience, at not just at a class, but at a course and a program level as well, which I think gets really exciting. So standards are, it's sort of like they grease the wheels, if you will, right? And streamlines those compliance checks for privacy and security policies. So that helps reduce onboarding time and cost. So it creates a ton of efficiencies. So when integrations use that LTI 1.3 as opposed to custom integrations, they actually get these assurances right off the bat. They don't have to actually worry about checking those boxes or whether in fact those boxes can be checked. There's a clear benefits to Top Hat as well, and obviously for Instructure in terms of the efficiency and scale this allows us to achieve, right? So by embracing standards as an organization, we can set the table for a whole range of institutions to benefit from more of these data-driven approaches to teaching and learning without having to recreate the wheel each time, which we have done in the past. So that's certainly speeding the efficiency. And as you mentioned, Melissa, at the outset, I think it's putting us on the same page as other partners like Instructure by creating a common language. So, collaboration, whether directly or indirectly, is a lot easier and more efficient because standards-based integrations do so much of this work for us. So we can meet the needs of partners like Penn State much more quickly and effectively. And I think it's making it a lot easier and less time consuming to leverage those leading indicators, that formative data from Top Hat to improve student engagement, performance, and satisfaction. But as I mentioned, I think the really exciting part is the work that Penn State is doing to combine this data with other indicators from Instructure and other sources to not only improve what's working from class to class, but at an actual program level. So, for example, I know Penn State is integrating demographic info that's being used to help faculty actually shape course content and delivery to better address the needs and makeup and the interest, frankly, of their students. And Top Hat, can come into play there by helping them assess whether or not those efforts are actually succeeding with those real-time sort of feedback loops. And, another sort of example there is by comparing and aggregating like attendance, homework completion, in-class engagement data against the average for a given course. Instructors can receive early warning signals that a student may be at risk of going off the rails perhaps and may need some extra support. So rather than trying to synthesize that data from a whole bunch of different sources, they can view that in a simple dashboard with a flag that draws their eye, and with a couple of clicks they can do that outreach. And I think the thing that gets really exciting too is we can start to answer questions at a course and a program level as well. Like, are there certain instructors who are achieving better outcomes relative to their peers? That's not a question that Top Hat can answer on its own, but when we start to combine it with these other data sources, that becomes possible. Like, what practices actually make the difference in terms of letter grades and persistence? What's the impact of hosting weekly quizzes on exam performance? Does using polls and discussions on a regular basis promote better student engagement and retention? Like, we think so, but I think it's even better if we can start to bear out those findings at a much larger scale. And I think the reality is, like, every institution has pockets of success and individual instructors who are doing really remarkable work. And by using data like this, we can start to answer these questions and then prioritize our efforts and investments to make learning more accessible, more inclusive, more engaging, and more valuable to students. And I think that data is also setting the table to accelerate research into teaching efficacy and the use of technology to ensure that more boats rise with the tide.
I love that, Andy. I know you're about to jump in. I was going to pass it over to you, building on what Eric just shared and the work that you all have been doing. What is the impact that you're seeing at Penn State?
Yeah, and I like how Eric kind of set the tone. Like, there's a lot of value in Top Hat and these other tools, right? And we had the problem. We're trying to figure out how to address it. Now, what's happening is we're finding that we have the data. Now we can start doing things with it, right? We're not concerned with how are they going to send it to us? What are these fields? How do you identify a user? But we can get the data, and it's there. And we're currently working on a platform right now, another unit within Penn State. And this is a nice part, that we don't have to be in the same room. They can know what the standard is and work on the data storage and not the Canvas side of it, and understand that part of it. So it's much easier to develop. They're working on a tool to look at kind of this course performance, like Eric talks about, for students to identify earlier on when students are not participating, right? When we kind of lose touch with them. And the big part, and we mainly focused about faculty, is at Penn State, we have a huge number of support staff that are working on student success, advising, even in athletics. There's many other staff that could use that data that is locked into Canvas or Top Hat or other learning tools and systems. And they don't have time to go out and learn what Top Hat does and how it works so they can analyze a report on their students. So getting the data out into a system that they can then learn about that system and what that consolidated report is telling them about their students, right? That their advisees are, oh, they haven't been logging in. They're online. They haven't been logging in for a few days. What's happening? All right. Or they're not completing these subjects. They're falling behind their peers. Let me get a meeting and chat with them about that. So that getting the data to the other folks that need it, that may not have been in those initial platforms, is another key aspect of that. And that's kind of, they're getting used to seeing this data now and putting in their own request of like, I would love to do this or love to see it this way. Right. So those simple flags are a great way for them to see what's happening with the students they do interact with. Faculty can do the same thing, but they could have done that a little bit beforehand, but now it's just a clearer picture across the tooling and what they can do. I'm going to get into it a little bit later, but I think the cohesive platform is a kind of a big deal here as well, that we're not looking at kind of 30 learning tools in Canvas. We're looking at a reporting analytics kind of platform and system where you can identify and determine what's happening, right? So there's a research aspect of that, along with kind of the teaching and learning side of this, that you can really dig into this. And it's been a great resource to now kind of free that data, right? We've been talking about that for years now. I can still remember the early conversations about Caliper, but the data's out there now, and now we can start using it. So that's kind of the exciting part. And I think we're kind of stepping forward beyond just hey, let's talk about getting this and actually getting it to the right places. The other group I haven't talked about yet is the administration side, that we have these tools out there. And when it comes time to look at usage of a tool, we actually have that information now. We can compare it to usage of another tool and look at student performance relative across those tools and make sure that the investments we've made as an institution kind of are good, right? That we're making the right decisions and being kind of the data-driven decision making we've always wanted to do. We can now do that on the learning tools and kind of at scale, right? And looking at all these tools separately and together and being able to get some of that administrative usage out to those folks that can make the budget decisions, right? I don't have the budget to go and get 30 tools, but if I can show these are really getting used and we need more things like this, that we can really invest in those areas.
Those are really, it's exciting to hear that, because I think something that you said, we're not just talking about getting the data, we're actually getting the data and we're now using the data. And I think, years ago when I first started getting involved in IMS, we were in a very different place. This is really exciting. I think to wrap up, I'm just going to ask each of you any closing thoughts or calls to action we'll be having other vendors attend this, there'll be institutions attending this, there'll be technical, non-technical, any calls to action. I'll start with you, Eric. Oh, you're on mute.
You'd think after a year and a half of being on Zoom, I would have figured out how to use the mute button, but it is what it is. No, it's not a call to action necessarily or at this point, but it's really exciting just to see what you can actually do and the work that Penn State is doing when you take the data from different sources and then start to present it in some of the ways that Andy described. It's pretty exciting because we can't do that on our own, but it's through these partnerships and these integrations that a whole range of new possibilities becomes possible. I would say, like, from a call to action perspective, and something that we're certainly thinking about is, we need to generate data with the needs of the instructor, instructional designers, and other stakeholders in mind. So the goal is how do we help our constituents drive meaningful decision making, and that's really got to be top of mind. It's not data for data's sake, because Lord knows there's enough data out there. It's creating useful data. So as we develop our products and services, we have to stay focused on high quality data that's designed to solve problems. And I think standards really help that process by making that data much more accessible. I can see a t-shirt, maybe Andy, we need to get t-shirts, free the data. but like starting a movement, and I think something that we've talked certainly about and is top of mind for a lot of folks in higher education is that people, are doubting the underlying value of a degree. There's, a fair bit of negative press out there, but, we believe, like probably most of the people viewing this, that a college degree is still the most important asset in securing meaningful, well-paid employment and just success and general well-being in life. But part of addressing, I think, that issue is unlocking the power of small data, those real-time signals and insights, the lagging indicators, and putting that stuff together so we can create those feedback loops, as Penn State is doing, to elevate the learning experience and deliver more of the support, the mentorship, the engagement that we believe really is at the very heart of creating value for today's students.
Oh, I love that. And I think we do have a new mantra, free the data. That's
Free
for
the
sure.
data.
Andy, free the data. Andy, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I talked a little this before, but like tools need to understand that they're a part of an ecosystem, right? That you are going to be right next to your competitor, right? That Top Hat, I'm sure I don't need to list it, but I know every one of your other competitors is probably within those 30 that we have, right? So make your tool stand out, right? Don't provide the basic of an LTI integration, right? Put deep launch in there, grade services, make sure it's easy to set up. Look at emerging ideas that are out there and also provide feedback to the standard and IMS, right? This is my plug to get involved, right? That don't wait for the standard to come to you and tell you need to do something, because the reason that standard exists is because your competitor's already enacted it. It's already part of their core product, right? So when it makes it to your desk of it's in the standard, that means it's already been in place at a couple of different pieces of software, right? That if there's a new service out there, that means other people have already implemented it. And that's kind of how that spec process works within IMS. So it is good to figure out where you want to be in terms of a platform, in terms of bleeding edge, cutting edge, right? And how much time you want to invest, but don't fall behind is kind of my recommendation on that end, because you will be in a LMS right next to your competitor, and those kind of lack of deep linking, for example, would pop up right away to your end users, right? Because they'll use it in one tool and wonder why it's not in another. And they won't know what it's called, but they'll just follow that with their feet. And the Caliper side, we're really starting to expect our vendors to have that on the tool vendor side, that new integrations, or in the future that these bigger integrations, that'll stand out if they have a Caliper feed, because then we can really assess how well they're being used and kind of put them into that ecosystem, right? If they're not supplying a Caliper feed, they're really not part of that ecosystem yet. And then Eric mentioned this as well, but high quality data, right? We don't want a feed. We want good, meaningful, actionable data in that Caliper feed. So think about what you can provide and try to push that out through those areas.
Thank you. And thank you both so much. What I love about this story and why we wanted to bring this to light was two things. One, again, we're all quietly working on standards in the background, and look at how we bring Caliper, LTI together, platforms together to really drive that success of an institution and many institutions. So there's quiet stories happening out there that we need to surface, because it does exactly what Andy and Eric shared. It allows us to have the impact as vendors, as institutions, as educators that we want. And it also allows us to help advance the standards. Without knowing this is going on, without seeing these stories, we can't make the standards better. We can't create new standards because we don't have the context for understanding where we need to go. So I will plug, participate, build and contribute to and leverage standards, and really think about how they all work together, just like in this story. So thank you everyone for your